Okay, if you'll take your seats, we'll go ahead and get started. My name's Cornell Clayton. I'm the director of the Thomas S. Foley Institute here at WSU. And on behalf of the Institute and on behalf of WSU, I want to welcome you out to our event with Senator Patty Murray today. Before I introduce the Senator, I just want to thank a couple of people who've been instrumental in organizing this event. I want to thank Senator Murray's office, of course, but also Colleen Kerr and Glenda Becker, who's part of the WSU government relations team here. I also want to thank Matt Jockers, who's here in the audience, who's the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. I also want to recognize Noel Schultz in the back there. President Schultz couldn't make it, but he'll be meeting with the senator later. And finally, I also want to recognize Danielle Fox, who's one of my former students, and as a student in the Comm College here. Her and her team, the All Comms group, was instrumental in picking today's topic. They wrote to Senator Murray's office and asked if she would come sometime to campus and speak about women in leadership. So I want to thank them as well. Patty Murray is Washington's senior United States Senator. First elected to office in 1992, Senator Murray has a proven track record of fighting for Washington state families in Congress. As a member of the Senate Democratic leadership, Senator Murray has established herself as a champion for students and working families and is a leader on education, transportation, budget issues, port security, health care, women, and veterans issues. In addition to being the first female senator from the state of Washington, Senator Murray previously served as both the first woman to chair the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee and the first woman to chair the Senate Budget Committee. She is currently the ranking member of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee and is the highest ranking woman in the United States Senate today. A unique voice in the Senate and a WSU alum, Senator Murray is known for her down-to-earth, determined style and is often looked to by her colleagues and the media for her ability to articulate how complex issues affect everyday Americans. Join me now in giving Senator Murray a warm Cougar welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. It really is a delight and honor to be here. And Dr. Clayton, thank you for the introduction. Looking forward to answering some of your questions. Am I echoing badly? Is it okay? Okay. But before I begin, I do want to send my deepest sympathies to the family of another WSU alum, one who fell in the line of duty this week protecting our community, Deputy DeRozier. On behalf of your WSU family, we salute you, and all of us thank you for your service. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk about this. It's something that's really important to me, and that is helping more women take on leadership roles in their communities and in the country and in really all walks of life. And I'm especially glad to be talking about this here today at WSU because, as some of you may know, this is where I got my start in politics. Now, most people know the story that's been told so many times about how I got into elected office when a state senator told me that I couldn't make a difference because I was just a mom in tennis shoes. That's when I was in Olympia trying to fight for a preschool program that the state legislature had cut the budget for. And he told me I couldn't make a difference, so I went out and organized thousands of parents, went back and got the program reinstated, showed him. But my political experience actually started here at WSU with a little known law on the books that we got changed, and that was when I came here as a freshman. There was a rule that in order to go to the dining hall, women had to wear dresses. Now that was a year that was really cold, there was a lot of snow, and I thought this is the most ridiculous, unfair rule I have ever seen. So I spoke up, I told other students that we had to change this, we went out, we worked, and now all of you can wear jeans to your dining hall. So I want you to know that's really what taught me a very important thing, that some things may be small, but you can take them on and change them and make a difference. And in order to do that, you just have to speak up and say it. And I have been encouraging women and men ever since to do just that. And it's really important, I think, now more than ever. If you care about an issue, if you think it's not right, if you think you ought to change it, Big or small, speak up, especially if you are someone who's never been asked to speak up. Because it is unfortunately still very true that as a woman, whether you're making a change in your community or you're running for office or you're trying to find your way through the US Senate, someone is more than likely to tell you something like, you can't make a difference, or to stop you from making a difference. And you know why they do that? Because they are afraid you will. They don't want to change. So in that spirit, I just wanted to take a few minutes today to share some of what I have learned in making my own voice heard, in the hopes that it is helpful to some of you to do the same. Because the fact is that our country needs you, every single one of you. Men, women, whatever background you come from, that's what will make our country have the capability to last far into the future and be strong. So before I take some questions, I thought I would just give you some of my hints. And the very first one is take the risk of speaking up. You deserve to be heard, and so does everyone else who's quietly thinking the same thing that you are. And don't be afraid to do things that you never thought you could do. I've done so many things I never thought I could, but I look at them as adventures, not as scary things. I never saw myself doing debates or speaking on the United States Senate floor or even doing speeches like this, but I have, and I am, and so can you. Secondly, stand with each other. There's a saying that behind every great man there is a great woman. Well, the truth is, behind every strong woman is a whole lot of other strong women. And I have seen that so many times since my very first days when I went into the United States Senate, when Senator Barbara Mikulski, who was the only Democratic senator there at the time, showed me the ropes. And I have seen it in what we created then, which was a bipartisan women's dinner of senators where we meet on a monthly basis to talk to each other and support each other. We were 6 women when I started. Today we are 25, Republicans and Democrats, and we work together and support each other and find common cause to make things work better for all of us. I've seen this happen when millions of women marched the day after President Trump's inauguration and laid the groundwork for a lot of activism to come. So my rule is here, when you want to get something done, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, because no one accomplishes anything by themselves. And you can do more than you ever imagined with other strong people, especially women and a few good men at your side. Third, stand up to bullies. People have so often told me that I couldn't do something or that I wasn't up to a challenge. When I first ran for public office, I was actually told that if you want to win as a woman, call yourself Pat so they don't know you're a woman. I was told that you don't know the right people. I was told that I didn't have enough money. I was told that I hadn't paid my dues. I was told that nobody was going to listen to me as a woman. Well, I got a lot of advice like that, and I'm standing in front of you as a United States Senator. So I didn't listen, here I am. I've heard a lot of things like this over the years. Back in before 2012, the Senate Democrats were in the majority, and we were looking at an election in 2012 that was pretty daunting, and most people thought we would lose the majority, lose seats, and it wasn't going to be a good year. So no one wanted to take on the job of becoming the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee chairwoman because they didn't want to have a loss on their watch. Well, I stood up and did it, and I said, yes, we can win it. And you know how I did it? I went out and recruited women across the country to run for the Senate. So not only did we keep the majority, but we gained seats with people like Elizabeth Warren, Claire McCaskill, Tammy Baldwin, Heidi Heitkamp, because they stood up and ran and because we worked hard and we made it happen. Another time I got told that you just can't do this was back in 2013 when Ted Cruz decided to hold up the whole government process along with some of his Republican colleagues to shut down the government. It's a terrible time, and everybody thought there is no way Republicans and Democrats are going to come together to write a budget agreement, and this is going to just remain bad. I took on the challenge. I worked with Congressman Paul Ryan, the speaker after that. We worked very hard. We had innumerable conversations. I gave him grief about his football team and told him how great the Seahawks were time and time again to get us back on track. And we wrote a budget deal and got it passed when no one thought we could, and that structure has stayed in place ever since then to keep our country moving in the right direction. So when people tell you you can't do something, just do it. Stand up and do it. Take on those tough challenges. Don't let naysayers stop you. And don't, by the way, let loud stop you. More often than not, that loud person who's talking over you or interrupting you is hiding the fact that he doesn't know the facts. Just remember that. So blow past those naysayers, take on challenges, focus on what you want to get done. You don't win every time, but every time you take something on, you learn something, you grow stronger, and it girds you for the next battle. So just don't let fear run your lives. I've said it before, and I'll say it again today. This is such an important time to speak up if you want to see something changed. Every one of you, no matter who you are, can make a difference. Every call we get, every tweet, every letter, every march, every visit to legislative offices does have an impact. And every new woman who runs for office and brings a new perspective to the table has an impact, whether it's in the City Hall or a school board or in the United States Senate or even the White House. And the fact is that in this country today, we do need each and every one of you. So I appreciate everybody who's standing up and speaking out and not giving up and trying, because that's what will really make our country move forward. So that's my speech to you today, and I'm looking forward to taking some questions and answers from you up here, right? Thank you.
So we solicited some questions from students and the community members online here, and so I have a number of them selected out.
Okay.
The first one's from Danielle Fox, who I mentioned earlier. She's an undergraduate in political science and public relations, and her question is, when Googling notable WSU alumni, Patty Murray is one of just 2 women who appear on a list of more than 50. What advice do you have specifically for young women at Washington State University hoping to reach a level of leadership like you have?
Oh, thank you for that question. Hopefully I answered some of that when I spoke, but I think the most important thing to remember always is that you have a voice and it's important. And if you feel the passion to stand up and speak out and run. Don't fear losing. I actually ran for the school board. It's the first office I ever ran for against an incumbent who'd been there forever. And I lost by 300 votes at the end of the day. But he ended up passing away from a very serious illness a few months later, and I was appointed to fill his seat because I went out and spoke positively and gave a vision. So that actually was my first elected office. By losing, I got on the board and went on from there to being in the state Senate and here in the United States Senate. So don't fear running. Your voice is important.
Okay, our next question is from Madison Hemphill. She's an undergraduate student majoring in public relations and risk and crisis communications. And she asks, with the growing number of women in the Senate, how has the atmosphere there changed? And is there a growing sense of camaraderie among women in Congress?
That's such an interesting question. Is Madison here? There, hi Madison. When I was first elected to the Senate, before I was elected, there were 2 women in the Senate. When I was elected, it was called the Year of the Woman in 1992, and we went to 6 out of 100, and that was the Year of the Woman. I think I was fortunate because a lot of the men who were in the Senate at the time sort of feared that we were going to come in and have some revolt and take over. And we weren't. We were just like them. We were passionate for our states. We worked on issues. We did our jobs, and we did it on purpose so that they would not exclude us, but recognize that we did the same thing they did and fought for issues we cared about. I think what we did was do our jobs, and they expected us to do something else. And I always think if you do your job and work hard, then you're respected. But it was hard because more often than not, I was the only woman in the room. I was the only woman on a committee hearing. When we were meeting to work on legislation, I was the only woman. It was a heavy, daunting experience, like, oh my gosh, if I don't say this, nobody else will. And time and time again, I realized how important it was to have diverse voices. Today, there are 25 women in the Senate. Every committee I sit on has more than one woman. Every meeting I'm in has more than one woman. Why is that important? Because when I say something, someone else says it too. It is echoed. It is said more than one time. It becomes more than just one person saying it in the room. So it has changed the dynamic. But women have also changed the dynamic in the Senate a lot of other ways too. I remember, and I've shared this before, but I distinctly remember when I came into the Senate, one of the first pieces of legislation we were working on was family leave, family and medical leave, sponsored by Ted Kennedy. And he was out on the floor speaking, and I went out and gave a speech on the floor of the Senate about a friend of mine whose 15-year-old son had leukemia. She worked at a firm here I won't name because it's going to be bad. They basically told her, if you take time off to care for your son, you will not have your job when you return. Her son ended up dying and she lost her job. And I said, that is not right in the United States of America. And I told that story on the floor very passionately. She was a close friend. And I walked off the floor, and one of the men senators said to me, you're not supposed to tell personal stories on the floor of the Senate. And I looked at him and I said, well, how do you make policy work if it isn't about real people? And you know, today, if you listen to the debate on the floor of the Senate, a lot of people tell personal stories. And I think women showed that if we really want to get things done, you have to understand it on a personal level. Charts and graphs are great, but they don't tell all the story. And so women have changed the place in a lot of different ways.
So I was going to follow up on that. You just partly answered it. Tina Brown just organized a conference on women in leadership last week. And Hillary Clinton was there, and she said, she was asked the question, do you think women lead differently than men? And part of it may be what you just said. But if you look at, for instance, someone like Senator Collins or Senator Blackburn, in terms of the policies they articulate, they're not different than their male Republican colleagues, for instance, Lamar Alexander or Mitch McConnell. Do you think it makes a substantive policy difference if you have women?
Well, I think you err if you think every woman is the same as every other woman. There's no doubt about it. But I do think, and I have seen throughout my career, that women tend to want to find a solution more than men. A lot of times men say, well, we'll set this up as a big debate, and in the next election I'll run on it. Whereas women more come to find that solution now, so they're more willing to work with others to find common ground to get things done. And work more collaborative, and are better listeners. I'm just going to tell you, the women are better listeners. And the better you listen, the more you hear what someone else needs, and that helps you get to a place where you can find solutions.
So this is another undergraduate student who is anonymous and writes, in recent years there has been much attention given to helping young women to have successful career paths and toward becoming leaders. But in many ways, young men are the problem today. They drop out of school at higher rates, have higher rates of incarceration and drug use, higher rates of depression and suicide, and today they are less likely to go on to college or postgraduate education. What should be done to address this problem?
Well, I'm going to assume it was a he. It's not wrong, and we do have to make sure that everyone has the support. I think women today are recognizing that if they don't speak up and speak out, and that they don't get the support, then they are the ones who are not in the boardrooms, who are not in elected office, whose voice is not there. And I am so proud of all the women today who are standing up. 100 women in the House of Representatives today. That's just amazing. It's not yet half. But I think we do have to pay attention to the fact that there are a lot of young men who are struggling today too. It's partly the economy, it's the cost of an education, it's the pressures that men and women have in getting a job and being able to compete, and we have to recognize it for everyone.
Okay, next question from Melissa Ruska, who's a political science major. She said, recently there's been a lot of discussion about filibuster reform in the Senate. Some Democratic presidential candidates like Jay Inslee would like to see the filibuster eliminated entirely. Others, especially some in the Senate, think it should be preserved. Where do you stand on filibuster reform?
Oh, I hear this every year, and if you're in the majority, you hate the filibuster, and if you're in the minority, you love the filibuster. And I've been in both places. And I can tell you, when you're in the minority and something you care passionately about that impacts everyone, not just for this year, but for a very long time, deserves to have the ability to be heard and listened to and respected. If the filibuster was gone right now, women would have lost the right to make their own health care choices in terms of health care. That would have been eliminated in the last year when the Republicans were in control of the House and Senate. There was a time when there was legislation to drill off the Washington coast for oil. If we didn't have a filibuster, that would be in law now. I can give you 100 different things that when I've been in the minority that I fear would have passed and been law now if we didn't have a filibuster. Filibuster is a tough rule because what it means is you have to find other people in the other party who will work with you to get something passed. Lamar Alexander, who is the Republican chair of the Health, Education, Labor Committee, is working with me right now on how we reauthorize the Higher Education Act and change the laws for access to college and affordability and issues like campus sexual assault. If we didn't have the filibuster rule, he would care less what I had to say. But because he wants to get this passed, he has to come to me, and I have told him, if you want to do this, then you have to make sure we address the issues of affordability. You have to make sure we address the issues of campus sexual assault. Will I get everything I want? No, but it will have to be included in that legislation. So I think it would be a mistake to eliminate the filibuster and lose the rights of minorities in this country.
Yeah, it's an interesting answer. So would you be in favor of reinstating the filibuster for judicial nominees?
So I am very concerned about the Senate rules that were changed a few weeks ago that allow lifetime appointments to the judiciary to be done by 50 votes in the United States Senate. And they're not just because we are seeing a slew of very, very conservative judges put in place, but the judiciary system has a special place in our democracy. That means that no matter who you are, where you come from, if you go before that court or an issue that you care about goes before that court, you will be given a fair process and be heard. And if we lose that, we lose something very important in this country. And I fear that with just 50 votes and the ability to jam through nominees from either side, in this case from the conservative side, that people will lose that trust in our judicial system, and that is not good for our democracy in the long run.
So I got to ask this question because this is my area of study too. So would you be in favor? There have been some proposals to expand the size of the Supreme Court after the next election. I assume you'd be opposed to that, or?
You know, I haven't looked at that seriously. You know, I think that the process, you can add, you can subtract. I don't know that it would change what the dynamic is in the country today in terms of justice on the court. I think that the more important answer is that we have a fair process, that we put people on the court that are not just seen as one side or the other, but come to it from a legal perspective, looking at the laws to judge.
So this is another undergraduate student who wants to remain anonymous, a political science and psychology major. Hi, Senator Murray. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the current state of the country in terms of partisan polarization and how divided people are. How do we go about repairing this to increase bipartisan cooperation in government and among citizens?
Well, there's no doubt that if you watch cable news, you will have picked a side, which is, I don't think, good for any of us, because I just mentioned listening to each other a few minutes ago. And if you don't understand where someone is coming from, you can't pass policies or have policies that work for the entire country. And the more divided we get, the harder it is to really have a country that can work for the most people. So, you know, how do we get past that? Well, first of all, I want to tell all of you that despite what you see on television, the high-profile issues, and there are a lot of them, there's a lot of things we do and do work together to get done. The appropriations bills, which is how we spend our money, are done in a bipartisan way. And we listen to each other, and you don't get everything you want, but you fight for what you think is important in the spending bills, no matter which appropriation bill it is, and we pass them together. Right now, as I told you, Lamar and I are working on higher education reauthorization. I'm working with Johnny Isakson on better policies for our veterans. He's a Republican from Georgia. A lot of work actually gets done. through respect and listening to people, but it is not high profile, and it certainly doesn't end up on the cable news networks. So that is a real challenge. But the real answer is, it's inside each one of us. We all have to take the time to step back from our angry sides and really listen to what it is that the other person really needs and why they feel the way they do and what their passion is coming from. When I worked with Paul Ryan on writing the bipartisan budget, which no one thought we could do, I spent a lot of time listening to him about what it was that was important to him that would give him a win in the budget that would allow him to work for it. He did the same to me, and that's the only way we got it passed. And we could have easily sat in a room together for 3 months, the time frame we were given, and just debated. But that wouldn't have produced a budget and gotten our country in a better place. And I think we all have to do that. Talk to people beyond just your framework, and you don't have to agree with them, but listen to them about how they came to their position. And you might find more agreement than you know.
Okay. So Mohammed Salem, who's a civil engineering major, asks, do you favor Medicare for all, and what are the challenges you see in having a single-payer health care system?
Big question. So how do we provide health care for all Americans, which is really what our goal should be. And obviously, one of the things we have done is pass the Obamacare ACA Act to try and begin to really address that. And it's been very frustrating that since Trump became in office, the only one thing he wants to do is have it not work, rather than saying what worked and what didn't work and how can we fix that. The goal really is to make sure that everybody has accessible, affordable health care. There's a lot of ways to get that. We're now having a presidential debate with a lot of our candidates talking about Medicare for all. There's Medicare buy-in. Our state is looking at a choice program that will allow people to buy into a public option. There's a lot of different ways to get there. You don't pass policy by going on a 10-second soundbite. You pass policy by really looking at the impacts, what works, what doesn't work, what are the facts, how much is it going to cost, what kind of changes will it be, and bring the public with you. And we're beginning to have that debate about a bigger way to change our healthcare system, and I'm in the process of learning as everyone else does. But I would tell every one of us that there is no perfect healthcare system. Everything we might do or not do will have upsides and downsides, but if you're going to vote for something, you have to understand what both sides are and then be willing to move forward on what you think is best.
So is that a maybe?
I think Medicare for All is a great soundbite. And I think that it says what people want to hear, is that there is a way for you to get health care no matter who you are. But the reality of it is quite different. If anybody who's on Medicare will tell you the first thing is that you pay for it. It's not free. So I'm worried that the way it's sometimes portrayed is that it doesn't cost anything. Also remember that Medicare right now is written for a senior population. So it doesn't cover OBGYN services or pediatrics or a lot of things for younger people. So it's not just simply buy in. It's a huge change to the healthcare system that I think we need to really understand before anybody starts saying that it is the solution for everything.
Okay. So next question is from a graduate student here, Noel Vest. I don't think Noel's here. He's in Vancouver actually telling his story today. He's a grad student in psychology. And he writes, Senator Schatz recently introduced...
Schatz, but that's okay.
Sorry.
Brian Schatz, Hawaii, yeah.
From Hawaii, introduced the REAL Act to restore Pell eligibility to incarcerated scholars. How do you see this legislation playing out in the current political climate? As a ranking member of the Education Committee, do you think this will make it out of committee? What will ultimately decide the fate of this bill?
So the REAL Act is legislation that will allow incarcerated people access to Pell Grants and financial aid, which I think is really important. If you've done your time and you need a job, and we would rather you had a job and the skills to get a job rather than end up back incarcerated. I think it's really a great piece of legislation. I told you a minute ago I'm working with Lamar Alexander to rewrite the Higher Education Act. It's one of the things I am pushing as a member of the minority. Without the filibuster, I can do that. And we're looking very seriously at putting it into our legislation.
Okay. Next question comes from David McLaren, who's an undergraduate student majoring in public relations and risk crisis communication. The current budget deficit is over $1 trillion. What should be done to reduce the federal deficit, and specifically what program or departments would you propose reductions in order to address this?
That's such an important question. I think we all should obviously be worried about the debt and deficit that our country is incurring. It is one of the reasons that we got into, well, virtually every budget crisis we've been in. It's what I had to work with Paul Ryan on. There were things that I had to give up and say, okay. There were things that he had to. But trying to get to a better place in terms of our deficit was one of the goals of our bill. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, I constantly look at our legislation to say, what are my priorities and what should I advocate for, and what is not a priority right now, or changed, or the dynamic in the country's changed that we can eliminate in a budget. And it's never easy. But this is not a one-sided conversation. One of the reasons that we have an increasing budget deficit today is because we don't have the revenue that we had from a year ago because of the tax cut that was passed a year ago that cost trillions of dollars, and we're now seeing the impact of it where our deficit is going up. So if you don't have the revenue coming in, then that means that you don't have the revenue to be able to pay for what your priorities are. I just was looking at a report this morning that said last year, a year ago, 30 companies in our country did not pay taxes. This year, because of the Republican tax cut, 60 companies did not pay taxes. 30 more companies are not contributing to the future of this country today. So revenue is an incredibly important part of how we balance our budget for the future.
So there's been some discussion about revisiting those tax cuts and reforming them. I assume you'd be in favor of that, and specifically, are there things you'd like to see done?
Well, I will tell you that I've been in the Senate for a long time. We've passed tax packages before. I have never seen anything like how that passed. It was written in just a few weeks, passed on the Senate floor, did not have a chance to really be evaluated. There was a lot of talk about how much money it would save or cost or not cost, and none of it was really known well before it was passed in a few short weeks. That's why you should not pass legislation in 3 weeks. We're now seeing the impact of this. So yeah, there is a lot of discussion about how we can change this so that it can be, so that middle-class families see a benefit who do not today. Our state in particular really got hit because one of the things that they eliminated, I didn't vote for this, so just eliminated our ability to write off our sales tax deduction. And so a lot of people are paying their taxes right now through yesterday and finding out that their refund was not what they expected. Even though this was sold a year and a half ago when it passed that every family would see, I think it was $2,000 or $3,000 more money. They're not. So we need to, I absolutely believe that we need to revisit that and change it so that the tax structure in this country works better for families. That's who we really need to be investing in.
Okay, and next question is from Simon Smith, who's a member of the community here. How do you think Washington State will benefit from the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act of 2019?
So I believe that is legislation on climate change that was introduced by a member of the House. I'm not sure. There's a lot of proposals out there on climate change right now, which is the good news. For a number of years now, we have not seen any legislation really put forward that looks at the issue of climate change. And it's now a discussion in our country, which I am very grateful for. And I think that there's a lot of broad proposals, but the general idea is that we have to recognize that climate change is having a huge impact. We see it here in our state, in our agricultural industry. We see it in our shellfish industry where, the shellfish growers are having polluted waters and can't continue to be competitive. We see it in the costs of wildfires and floods. We see it in health impacts where more and more young people are getting asthma. We see it in all kinds of costs that way. One of the impacts that we are really seeing is actually on the defense side. Our military bases, a lot of them are built on the water, particularly on the East Coast, and because of rising coastal waters, we're going to have to pay to move those bases, and it is going to cost all of us. So The lack of inaction on climate change is costing us not just in health, but it's costing us in terms of our own budget and what we have to put out, that old balancing the budget thing. If you're paying to move bases, you're not providing education. And we need to deal with this. And we also know that it doesn't happen by just hoping. It happens because we look at all of our policies, whether it's how we build our transportation infrastructure, what we invest our money in terms of clean energy and research, how we look at the jobs of the future and provide people with the skills to do that. So it has to be a very broad look at it, and we're just now finally getting some really good ideas out there that Congress is going to have to grapple with.
So I have to ask you then, what's your position on the Green New Deal?
So the Green New Deal is not legislation, it's actually an idea. And it is an idea that's been proposed that looks at how we can look at climate change over all aspects of everything we do in Congress. And I think it's getting a lot of attention. It isn't something that you pass or don't pass, it's more of a resolution. We're looking at climate change.
So next question is from Julia Leonelli, who's an undergraduate student in political science and philosophy and women's studies. She writes, the Violence Against Women Act failed to get renewed by Congress and was discontinued funding after February 2019. What steps have you taken or will you take to ensure victims of sexual and domestic violence are still protected while this act is no longer funded?
So the Violence Against Women Act is legislation that passed back in 1992-93 for the first time ever to recognize domestic violence as a crime and to give people the services they need to get out of abusive situations. It's been renewed several times, changed several times. Last time it was renewed, we added Native American for the very first time to include protections for them. And the House had just, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, passed the reauthorization again. We haven't passed it in the Senate. The Senate is not bringing it up right now because the House included a provision for the first time ever that allows that protects women who are in abusive situations from gun violence by a boyfriend. It's called the Boyfriend Clause. And the Senate Republicans are refusing to bring it up right now. The good news is, she mentioned that the funding wasn't occurring. The funding will continue because we do that in the appropriations bill. It's better if we have an authorization, but we can continue to provide the funding that's so vital out of that program. But I predict that the Senate Republicans will bring it up. There's a lot of support for it, and I think they will pay the price if they don't.
Okay. So Chloe Spedden, who's an undergraduate majoring in secondary education, writes, what encouraged you to go into politics? And as a woman, do you believe it has been harder for you to move up in leadership?
Well, I got into politics because I got mad about something that was happening, and I said, not on my watch. I'd rather be in the middle of the room negotiating and working and speaking on the Senate floor than yelling at my television, so it works out. So I got motivated because I wanted to be part of finding solutions rather than just being angry. And as an elected official, you find that you can get things done. Are you frustrated a lot? Absolutely. Do you disagree with other people and you have arguments? Of course. But you are there. You're part of it. Your voice is being heard. And to me, that is really important. Moving up in leadership, yeah, there was no women in leadership. And I think part of it was that the men felt guilty. So I was in the right place at the right time. But I also think that they recognized when I was at the table, we had different discussions. There are 4 leaders elected in the United States Senate. I'm the 3rd. And we have discussions constantly about what we're going to bring up, how we're going to do policy, bring in different ideas, what's the conversation. And I'm usually the one who says, well, when I was home last week, people were asking me about the Violence Against Women Act. So, or I was at home and I heard young students here at WSU talking about how important access was and affordability and campus sexual violence. So that's what we should be focused on. So I think they value my voice and the perspective that I bring, which has allowed me to move up.
Great. So I just got the signal, one more question, and then our time's up. So this is a good one to end on, and I'm going to get this name wrong, I'm sure. It's Di Nugent, I think. He's an undergraduate majoring in advertising. And he writes, how did your experience at Washington State University propel you towards a successful career?
I think WSU provided an environment that was that allowed me the ability to speak up and learn and have my voice be heard. And it's where I met my husband, who's in the back of the room today, and who's been, you know, you can't do this if your family's not supportive. And he's been there and been a part of my ability to do what I am able to do. So.
This has been a wonderful conversation, and it's been too long since you've been back to WSU.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you.